Aloha mai kako. Oh, mahalo, Manu.
E kipa mai kako. Midday Manaʻo with Manu and Mehana.
Yes. So honora, so we gotta always add extra inside there.
And today we have a also.
So that's Manu's hakalama for the day. Yeah. If you guys never know what hakalama is, go look.
It's a syllabary, not a silly berry. It's a syllabary. Syllables.
Today, of course, we're doing the show a little bit different today. We have a special guest, and rather than bringing her on later, we just brought her on from the top of the show, right? It's our very own Hinaleimoana Wong-Kalu, also known worldwide as Kumu Hina, right? And I say worldwide because she's one of only 4 Hawaiians that stay on Netflix. Right now, go check them out.
Pa'i lima kako no ka hiki ana mai o Hinaleimoana. Kumu Hina no ho'i. Let's all give a round of applause to our dear friend Hina.
Mahalo nui ia ʻoe Mehana, ia ʻoe ke kahi manu. Mahalo nui te hui ano kātou. Aloha mai e nā hoa kipa o te ia wahi Midday Manaʻo e.
Oh yeah.
Te rano Midday Manaʻo.
Oh, yeah.
It is an honor to be sitting here. And I am happy to share just the latest goings on. But you're so right in talking about, especially for this month, because the outside world, outside of the boundaries of Kanaka in the Pai'aina, people of the LGBT community are being celebrated. And the work that has been put into a book now, which it's a children's book, and it's become a museum exhibit, and it's also become a film. This work will hopefully help to reinstate our people's sense of Mahu. And what does that mean? How do we get people to understand our perspective?
We're going to talk a little bit more about the book and the film in a little bit, but dive a little bit deeper for us, because if you grew up here in Hawaii, you grew up with the terminology with Mahu,
yes.
right? And we have poʻe Mahu in our ohana, and and so we've engaged with it, but kind of from a distance at times, right? There's still struggles within ohana that have a hard time understanding, dealing with, and so forth, right? Let me just ask you the plain question, like from a general audience member would ask, right? What does Mahu mean to you?
Mahu to me is magic. Mahu is mana. Mahu is the word that recognizes an individual for being a culmination of kane and wahine. And each person is different. We have different heart, different spirit, and that's an important part of who we are. But, some Mahu, mai ke kane a I ka wahine, mai ka wahine a I ke kane. Because Mahu applies to both. The Western world would call male to female and then female to male. Not all of our people, quote unquote, transition and move specifically from one to another. Sometimes Mahu can exist right in the middle, exactly as they are. And they're sort of how do I say? Again, this is how the world of the West looks at us. An effeminate male or a masculine female. Mahu to me is the ability of a person to have some degree of both within them, in mind, heart, spirit. What we do with our physical self is a matter of other things. It's a matter of our cultural influence. It's a matter of our environment. For me, going from being my family's son to my family's daughter is what I personally did to adjust and acclimate, and also hopefully make myself somebody that can interact with others. But not everybody chooses that, and it's okay. No la kou no ke la kuleana.
And you bring up something really important, and that's the difference between sex, gender, right? Identification, function. Right, because one of the discussions I've had before is what was the role? There was a role and function in traditional society of the Mahu, right? That goes beyond what we've kind of. And this is maybe a little bit early in the day to introduce this word, but kind of fetishized about that word, Mahu, right?
You know, and before we get to that, I want to introduce another concept for you to maybe weave the two together. You know, in our work at Kamehameha schools, we really dive deep into mo'olelo. And a lot of those mo'olelo have to do with the time of Kamehameha and you know, Kelava, mamua o kahiki ana mai o na haole, you know, before the coming of foreigners, or at least recorded. But the term Ikani is really very different also, I think, from what we're discussing today as Mahu. So if you can maybe kind of weave the two, and then, and then back to Mehana's point, the role in the family. Ikane and Mahu o ko'a.
Absolutely. To me, Ikane, the understanding of Ikane is about a physical relationship that occurs between the kane, and wahine, but it doesn't necessarily mean that any one of those individuals possess a kind of duality, which is kane wahine, which is clearly very related to one's emotional understanding and sense of place, as well as their spiritual understanding. From the Western clinical world, and when you look inside our dictionary, Mahu does not speak to any of that. So Aikane could be two kane, they look like your, gender binary man or gender binary woman, and they may have a relationship. Now, Aikane is speaking to a closeness. The level and the degree of that closeness is not something that should be characterized nor qualified by what outside eyes look at that for being. So if two men, for example, reside together, rely on one another, share, you know, the most bonding of intimacies, it doesn't necessarily require them to be sexually intimate with each other. It doesn't mean that they can't be. It's for each individual.
Okay, so that's, I think that's I think because we don't know, and we bring this up in this particular mahina, again, as Mehana said earlier, you know, we have to have 1 month for Olelo Hawaii and 1 month for these discussions. But these discussions, and they also are very pili ika no'ono'o ana ika hui kau noho'i, in the thinking and also the confusion among our young kids. So I still want to get back to the role in the family of what Mehana asked earlier, but also maybe weave into that now words of wisdom and experience to kapo'e opio, kapo'e kamaiki, kapo'e kamali'i, that really don't know what's going on in their own thinking.
Yes, Manu, and thank you for taking us down this path. If you think of the word that many of us may have heard now in contemporary Hawaii, the word bromance. I don't know how or when this word was introduced, but if any one of you have ever heard of that word bromance, I guess what it's really saying is two bara guys who can, you know, they could look like they're physically active and they might be muscular and they might not be feminine acting, but they connect and they're pili and they're okay with it. Aikane to me is best summed up in that English word if I had to use one.
Then eventually they get to menopause. Anyway. No, hey,
that was our word of the day.
A word of the day.
Yes, menopause.
Menopause.
It's like a mani-pedi and all that.
So if that's the case, well then what does Mahu experience?
So go back down that
pause.
Lua Lapaki rabbit hole.
Lua Lapaki.
Rabbit hole.
See, I heard him only quick. I was like, are you talking about a jacket now or socks? What are we talking about? Rabbits. That's right.
No, but hoi no.
I.
You know, one of the things I think that, and maybe this can help go down that rabbit hole, is the word Pilina, right? So Pilina is so important in this sense because what we're really talking about is relationships. The naming, the titling, the names, the words given is based on these relationships,
Yes.
right? And the understanding of how one relates to something. Deities, people, family, right? Those who you're intimate with, right? All have. And the beauty of our Olelo Hawaii, right, is we had so much different names. If you like, go look Family Systems of Ka'u, right? And Pukui does an amazing job, and the informants of pulling together all these terminologies of different types of relationships, right, in there, between, and when we was talking about Ikani, right, so we have Kamehameha and the Poʻekanaka, you know, at his time, and then we have Hi'iaka, of course,
Yes.
right, Klimpili to us when we
boy.
talk about, about Ikani, which gives us really good lessons that these are definitely magical beings.
You know, I want to, if I can introduce, or go back to your mention of Merika Vena Pukui, and we are all very much, and Merika Vena Pukui's Manaʻo is not the defining Manaʻo of the Hawaiian people. But if I know her family well enough to know her ano, she was very sort of very quiet and almost shy and timid in her way, but deep in knowledge. But she could talk about things like this, and just like it was just regular. You know, and so there was no like, oh, we don't talk about those things. You know, like how when we have been groomed over generations by outside influences or what, that really took that acceptance away very, very quickly. Marika Venapukui, in her very timid, shy way, was, oh yeah, that's regular.
That's regular,
Pea ko mana o no ke la.
Well, this is a wonderful segue into a little bit about my project because Kapaemahu, I had heard about Kapaemahu many years ago from my mentor and best friend Kawaiki, Dana Kawaiki Olaris. And it was echoed at the time that we were at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And this mo'olelo of Kapaemahu speaks to 4 legendary healers, Hele mai lako, mai kaiki mai. You know, and they arrive and they bring the knowledge of healing to the people here. And the fact that, of course, it's in the name, but when the stones move from, and I'm sure that we could all remember them if we went to the beach when we were young.
Remember.
And they were just stones. They were just very large stones there on the beach. We may not have had any clue of what they were. And now that we see from about 1997, when they were rededicated and the fence was put around them and they were organized in this way, a plaque was made. But that plaque really didn't say anything about this. And what you were speaking about with Mary Kavena Pukui and speaking of things of this nature in just a rather matter of fact, and it's all normal, that really resonated with me because we as Kanaka need to be able to have a sense of normalcy of place. It's normal to be Mahu and sit next to Wahine and Kane and hold space. Me having kuleana, others like me having kuleana, this should be just a regular part of everyday society. But when it came to the stones and this plaque that, I mean, how often do we get to see stones that were taken all the way from Kaimuki down to here on the shores of Waikiki Beach? And yet, the commemoration of them in the plaque only says wizards, wizard stones.
Yeah.
That didn't sit well with me. And, you know, this is another contentious topic because kupuna of a certain time, they're products of their time and they're products of the information and knowledge that was either shared with them or held from them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
So wizard stones is probably a term not from our time,
Yes.
but from a time before where English was spoken in a certain way and things were described in a certain way, and so
And things were left out, which
And
is
things were
more
left
so
out.
what Hina's
Right,
is.
that-
Yeah.
let me give you just before you continue. I want to for those of you who are out there and are familiar with Waikiki, and many of us are. So where the police substation is, right at Kuhio Beach in an area of Waikiki, I think it's called Uluko,
Aye.
next to Hinaleimoana. But I bring this up, and you can continue with that. I remember when the Pohaku Kapaemahu were rededicated, and they were rededicated when at the time I was working at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs by Papa Henry Awai. And one thing I do remember that his insistence on was the inclusion of bamboo or ohe as much as we think of la'i or tea leaf as being the things for blessings and all of that. It was the ohe that he used, and I wish I remembered his words, because he, as a healer himself, as a mea la'au lapa'au, I don't want to say kahuna per se, but I would gamble that would be correct. But at that, when and in the current setting, and you're going to tell us about that in your story of where they are today, where they came from Kaimuki, Ahiki, Waikiki, Ho'one'e Ho'ia. So from Kaimuki to Waikiki, and then even within Waikiki moved again. But I remember the dedication of that by a very traditional kupuna who reminded me, if I ever had to imagine what an older Kamehameha would look like, it was Papa Henry Awai. But Peha ko mana'o no kela, ka ho'ola'a ana, and the ceremony is pau, but the ho'ailona, the sign, remains.
Aye.
Wizard stones, back to that mana'o.
Well, in looking at what was done and not having been present, I could only surmise.
It's way before your time this way.
I'm not sure where I was in the Pae'aina at
You
that
were probably about
dedication.
3 years old.
Oh, Manu, ole. The rededication, I know had involved different kupuna and different people, and so this mix of individuals that came together to work on what was going to be the dedication ceremony, what was going to be the ha'i olelo, and then what was going to be the ha'i mo'olelo in the plaque.
Right.
So we can't really know now
unless
we have somebody to actually say who was a part of the planning. And right now, that circle is beyond my reach.
Yeah. And ours too, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
So focusing only on the plaque and what the outside world would read when they go to the stones, I could not appreciate fully the context of this, because if my guess is correct, kupuna of that time would often guard certain knowledge.
No, they're very Christian too.
And very
say
Christian.
Straight up.
Yes.
Sometimes, but I think that's correct.
In this
Sort
topic,
of,
maybe.
Right.
Right.
Ho'ohuna.
That means to sort of veil or hide
to veil it.
something. You don't want to give it all away.
That's the word, Manu. Veil.
That's a great way.
And to veil this, for me, it would only serve to keep people like me in this time of our existence and generations more from seeing an example of normalcy. And that is the basis for my desire, as well as my support of myself and my team moving forward to bring the mo'olelo in this way. And now, it certainly has not gone without its own, bit of controversy and contention.
Sure.
And so I can only hope that, number one, those kanaka, kama'aina, and malihini haole, all those who come to partake of the story, whether it be in the Bishop Museum exhibit, or seeing the movie, or even coming down to see the stones, I hope that they will open their third eye here to seeing what exactly does this story mean for us and for Kanaka. That's my focus. For Kanaka, I want our people to see people that can be categorized as Mahu, as normal like everybody else, and not some strange or foreign thing, and not something to always have the pejorative applied to us. The word Mahu, when I was growing up, was a weapon against me. A weapon. And they're hurtful times. So, with my every breath, in my every effort, I will make sure that by validating my rightful place next to Wahine and Kane, I hope that all other Wahine and Kane will look at other Mahu in and around their spaces and say, you are one of us. No better, no worse. We are a Lahui. This is what makes us a people. Because our culture, look at our culture, Oia. Oau, Ooi, Oia. He, she, and it.
Yeah.
Our culture tells us
differentiation
there was no
in
Yeah,
yes.
genderizing.
in the
No
pronouns.
genderizing.
As far as
It's
it's
roles.
him or her, it's kona or kana.
Aye.
It doesn't say his or hers.
Aye.
Let me give you just a little break over here because this is a pu'uwai moment. It's when you have this emotion in your heart. But I want to just say before we get further into the story of Kapaemahu here on Midday Manaʻo with Manu and Mehana, is that you look at what Hinaleimoana has done, and maybe it takes sometimes that those experiences, just tugging at the heart, and look what has happened as an educator in the charter schools movement. As a poe Hula as well, as a Kumu, and again, as you mentioned in the introduction, Kumu Hina, and a beautiful composer. Who doesn't know Haʻaheo at this point? And so Yaoi Hinaleimoana, mahalo nui Yaoi, kahana mamuli hoi o kau ho eha ia mai, ika wā o pio. But at some point, we get over it.
Aye.
Or we think we get over it. And I would like to ask you, when was it in your ola? Because I know I'm pretty much the oldest guy in the room here, or the oldest, I should say, kanaka in the room here. But when was that? When did you get sort of beyond the whole eha ia ana yaoi to your very Haʻaheo stature that you have embodied, that you do embody so well?
I have been on a slow progression. And fortunately, I was raised by all of my grandparents, whom I credit all of them for helping to make me who I am. But I must credit my father. My father, and I invoke his name, Henry Dayao Wong. And in my father's eyes, because I transitioned in front of him, I went from expressing and articulating my existence as my family's son to my family's daughter in front of my father in his house. And in my father's book, he said, I have only 2 kulena I want from you to fulfill in your life, and that is to finish school and take care of your grandmother. After that, I don't care what you go do. So what he, in my dad's own way of saying it, he said, I accept you and whatever your road and your life brings. But this is what I want from you. That taught me, it is my duty to fulfill it, providing that I can fulfill this responsibility, this obligation that my father has charged me with. I have acceptance. So at the university then, in this time, and that's when you and I first met. We met when I came into Halauna Kamale.
Right.
And at that time, we would have been considered Hula brothers.
Right.
But now I get to be a Hula sister too.
So,
And now I get to be Hula
Ohana.
sister.
Yeah,
See?
yeah.
Hula Ohana.
She's the only one that's the hula brother and sister of the two of us.
Well,
Yeah.
hey, Pauahi, as product of Pauahi, to become good and industrious men and women.
There you go.
Well, here you go. Oh my gosh, men and women.
Kamehameha.
Imua kamehameha e nā pua'a Pauahi.
No, my God, that's, you know what? And this again, we brought this up before, is when you sort of insert a little bit of aka in the middle of a really very ko'i discussion. I mean, my goodness, Hinaleimoana. You're right, and I look at you, and I don't know your dad. I know your brother, and I think the world does, but I also know your mom, and she and Georgette, just lovely. What a lovely Wahine Hawaii, and aloha to you, Georgette. I know you're probably going to be watching out there,
Hey, Mom.
but I'm telling you, it's in the course of our lives, and as they say, as we all know, pokole ho'i keola. Life is very the keola honua ana. Life on earth is really very short, and I look at you. I barely remember the you. Mamua, and because I think
It's
you
because
have.
he never noticed me. That's why 'cause I was.
Oh no! I
noticed me in the
remember you
back.
came to one of our Halloween parties, my birthday, Halloween.
You remember that,
I
Manu?
do. I totally do. But I think, what's really interesting here, and the mana kekahi mana, the streams of mana that have come towards you was the kaho'oko ana. I kau mea I ho'okule ana I ai maluna o. Is that her own immediate family gave you a challenge and a responsibility. If you fulfill this, then you'll be good. And maybe that was the moment.
It was.
That was the moment, a moment.
It was. And so at the same time that I'm going to school, at the same time I'm taking care of my father's mother, I started to, I came into Hula.
I bet I know her name. Her name was Popo.
Yes. Yes.
And she was married.
Good guess.
And wait, let me guess. Was she married to Gungung?
Yes. Which means grandmother and grandfather. But did you know? Did you know that by
So
right
cheap.
that should have been applied if my mother was Chinese?
Yeah.
Popo and Gungung is if my mother's Chinese, but Ama and Appa should have been the reference to them because they're my father's parents.
That's right. See, again, Midday
Just so
Manaʻo. There you go.
multicultural.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
No,
was
but
so
that's
multicultural.
those are the intricacies. But and not only you're such a combination of so many things, but we're talking Hawaii and Pake or Chinese and probably other things too in there. What,
Tonga.
Yeah.
Tonga.
And there's a couple other things in there, I'm sure.
Yeah, okay lah. If I no
another
pa
show.
ka
Remember,
ko,
I know your mama.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
But anyway, keep going. Let's get to your project.
I wanted to say too before she talks about the stories, just for everybody, go to Bishop Museum. Bishop Museum now has the showcase open right now. Right, if you go to Bishop Museum today or for the next, how long is it going to be there?
Well, the grand opening is on.
No,
Yeah.
because that was yesterday.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
yesterday.
Okay.
So
and it feels like tomorrow.
it feels like next week, but it was actually yesterday.
Yeah.
So,
So come check us out.
so it's going on live right now. If you guys go down to Bishop Museum, also go to Namea Hawaii, right, and grab yourselves these books, right, and talk to your children's teachers. Right, these are meant for school teachers. These are meant for children, but it can also help get you ma'a to this mo'olelo too, because it's written in a way for keiki, so that even us adults can get a grasp of it.
If you're not sure where Bishop Museum is, it's 1525 Bernice Street, Honolulu, Hawaii 96817, just makai of Kamehameha Shopping Center. That's right.
Owai kai no o ke la wahi akula.
Kaivi Ula.
Kaivi
Ula, Kaino Oia Aina. Kaivi Ula, o Kamehameha.
So can you tell that I went to public school? I have no clue what they're doing right now. I have no clue. It's a chip that goes off in the back of their
Ula
head.
is the name of the land
Anytime
area of Bishop Museum
those
in
names come
Kapaemahu.
up.
Are you still talking?
See, my whole life was this.
But you're right. So again, hele mai ke ibanava ano. Just go this summer. Take your keiki to Kaivi Ula to Kahaleho Ike o Kamehameha, which is an older name for Bishop Museum, and go see not just the Kapaemahu exhibit, but go see all of the things that we think we saw it all one time when we were in 4th grade. but you go take your family there. Let's hear about the project.
You know, and wait, one more thing. So another place you guys can find her is at Hula, the CNHA convention. Hina will be facilitating a panel called Mahu. There. So if you want to get more deeper into this discussion that we've just kind of touched the surface on, register for the upcoming conference at hawaiiancouncil.org/convention, or just go to the main page, right? And you can register for the convention there, and you can see Manu and me, and of course Hina's panel. So that, you know, we're just skimming the top of this topic here, and I'm sure her and her Hula will be going much deeper into
But
it.
you know,
Okay, now
if
tell the
it's
story.
but it's gonna be
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Let's
That
go.
was Manu's hakalama for the day.
Yeah.
So let's hear about what you did. I mean, you look at the Keia Puke and He Hakau Ihana.
Well, I take it back to my colleagues, Dr. Dean Hamer and Joe Wilson. And when I first met them, they thought I was an interesting person.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Hoya Hoya Day.
And so, well, I didn't agree with them, but I said, okay, all right, fine. If you want to go ahead and make a movie about my life, then so be it.
So that was the Kumu Hina
That was
project.
the Kumu Hina project.
Right.
But in acclimating them to the understanding of Mahu, I explained to them the meaning of Mahu, Kapaemahu as an example of clearly in our history, this is something commonplace. And that was the beginning of the journey. And so we spent the next several years on the back end of working on different projects. Homework went into researching this and pulling out the original manuscript that was documented by none other than your kupuna,
Yeah, great grandfather.
your great-grandfather, James A'alapuna Harbottle Boyd. And it is thanks to him. And did you know that one day I went with a dear friend of mine? I said, T, what are you doing? My friend came from Maui and said, oh, take me to the graveyard. Which graveyard are we going? Oh, I don't know. And so I said, okay, well, we'll get in the car and go. And the graveyard that I went to was clearly the one on Nu'uanu. And I didn't...
Oahu Cemetery.
Oahu Cemetery.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where I was going, but I ended up parking the car. And the first place I actually pulled up right next to it, what happened to my friend's family. And my friend looked and said, so we were guided by the spirit there. And the second place that we went, I said, well, we're going to go here. And I just meandered through until I walked straight into the park. I didn't know. I've never been there before. And where I sat, and then I looked up and I was like, oh my gosh. And I was sitting at your great-grandfather's
Yeah. Yeah.
gravesite.
Yeah.
And
You shared that story with me, and I just think that you know there is coincidence in life, and then there is just mana.
Right.
I mean, you know,
Magic.
magic.
Yeah.
I think that's
Magic.
how we started this conversation, and I mahalo you for just honoring even the name of the family. He did document a big chunk of the story about Kapaemahu, and referred to as the Wizard Stones of Waikiki. We know better now that there's much more than that. But the subject of, or the subject matter or subject matters that are not necessarily comfortable with everyone's thinking today, no matter what age you're from, and all of the many people who now live in Hawaii who aren't from here at all. But these kinds of stories, similar but and yet completely different, occur all over the world.
Right.
So, but mahalo for that. So
mahalo. And today I get to sing the praise of your kupuna and your name and your lineage that you come from, Manu, because were it not for the articulations of your great-grandfather, we may have been left with uncertainty as to the nature of the four healers. But he clearly states that he talks about the character and the color of their voice. He talks about their stature and their height, but their mannerisms.
Yeah.
So this whole explanation of the nature of the healers really did confirm for me that, yes, Pololei no, Kapai, Mahu, that Mahu component in there spoke to them, and it was documented.
You know the name. There are three words in the name. Kapaemahu. Ka is an article, which is one of the ways to say the in Hawaiian. Pai is often is a role, and there are many examples throughout Hawaii of other types of formations of stones or even islands. Pai Aina is the same thing, a roll of land or an archipelago, a roll of islands. And then Mahu, of course, what we're talking about today. And the words, or a word in English that's used to describe Mahu sometimes is hermaphrodite. And hermaphrodite is it said neither male, neither female, or male and female. Interestingly, that the a'ali'i lei, and that I got this beautiful lei from cousin Mehana, but the a'ali'i plant itself, Doronea viscosa is the scientific name, but a'ali'i kumakani can also be male, female, or neither. And so when you have, if you're going to see Rick Barboza down at Hui Ku Mauliola to go buy your a'ali'i plants, always plant more like 3 or 4 together because they feed off each other and the wind makes it happen. But even in this keia kino lau, that is pili mawaina o kako, mako nei hoi, kapoe hula, because this is a kino lau of laka as well. But the sexuality of the a'ali itself, as with other plants, that's why when you get a'ali, sometimes and she don't bloom, she not gonna bloom. But you plant one, another one next to it, might bloom. You get 3 or 4.
need inspiration.
Karen's going bloom.
Need inspiration, need kokua.
Sometimes you need a little kokua.
Need a kokua.
You know what? We've had a blast on today's show, and we'd like to thank all of you guys for hanging in there with us today. Again, go down to Bishop Museum, check this out. Come and check us all out at Hula, the Native Hawaiian Convention, July 19th to the 22nd. And mahalo nui.
I have one last question
Okay,
though. I want to personalize the Pai Mahu, the actual. Can you reveal the actual 4 names of each of the stones?
Yes. Kapaemahu, Kinohi, Kahaloa, and Kapuni.
Oh, yeah.
And
Ola.
in the Hawaiian thinking, when you kapa inoa or when you ho'omana'o inoa, you remember the names, you personalize them, and now you know those are the names of the 4 pohaku kaulana loa, e noho nei, e noho mauana, ma Waikiki, o ahu o kakuhi.
Different from this famous pohakus here, the 3 famous pohakus of Manu, Hinaleimoana, and Mehana.
The Rolling Stones.
What would that be in English?
Midday Manaʻo.
In English, in English, how would they call us? They're gonna call us
The Three Stooges
They
or
would
the
call us
Chiamigos?
Larry, Moe, and Curly. That's what they would call us. Or Musketeer, Helu Ekahi, Elua, and Meka Ekolu.
Oh my goodness, we gotta bring you back more often.
Aye.
You know, mahalo for this, and mahalo to all of you, and of course, Kaiser Permanente, the Community Benefit Fund, and the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. From all of us to all of you.
Go to Bishop Museum and go learn about our heritage.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Mahalo nui, ahui ko
Mahalo,
kaku.
mahalo, aloha, ai, mahalo Manu, mahalo Mehana.